fifth graders, and welcome to another science video test review. Today we are going to be talking about the excretory system, and in particular the urinary system. Okay, let's look real quickly, somewhat of a review, because we've already talked about the respiratory system and the digestive system. But let's look at some different ways that the body gets rid of wastes. One, solid waste, let's say stuff that your body doesn't need from the burrito that you just ate. The digestive system is responsible for getting rid of stuff that is not needed for the body. The respiratory system is responsible for getting rid of the carbon dioxide that our body doesn't need. We talked about how the blood takes oxygen and food, it goes into a body cell. Inside of the body cell is a mitochondria, and the mitochondria converts that oxygen and food into energy and carbon dioxide. We use the energy, but the carbon dioxide we need to get rid of. The circulatory system takes that carbon dioxide by the blood back to the alveoli, where we then breathe it out. So that's how we get rid of carbon dioxide. What about liquid waste that we don't need? The urinary system gets rid of the liquid waste that we do not need. And finally, sweat is a waste, and it is released by the integumentary system. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about that right now. So the integumentary system basically is the skin. It's actually a whole organ system. And one of its many functions, besides protecting us and making us look good, is to get rid of waste that we don't need. And the way it does that is by pushing wastes up the pores and coming out. It pushes up the wastes, like water, maybe some salt that we don't need, other wastes, comes out of the skin, and that's what happens when we sweat. Another thing that sweating does is it acts as a kind of an air conditioning. It cools us off. When we are sweating and we have that moisture all over us, the air hits us, and the air cools off that water. That water starts to evaporate, that sweat starts to evaporate, and that process of evaporation cools us off. Okay, so that is the integumentary system, and sweating is one way that we get rid of waste. What about the urinary system? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at it here. Just by way of a quick review here, because the liver actually participates in the digestive system as well as the urinary system. The liver in the digestive system produces this gastric juice called bile. Now that bile breaks down food during digestion, and that allows the food then to be absorbed by the body through the walls of the small intestine, through the walls of the capillaries, and that's how it's able to get into our bloodstream. But the bile can only break down the food so much. There is still some waste that's left into the bloodstream that we need to get rid of. That blood does make its way to the liver. The liver then filters some of that waste. What the liver cannot filter sends to the kidneys. Okay, so both the liver and the kidneys both do a little bit of filtering. Okay, so the blood with waste, the stuff that came from the liver, because remember there's still a little bit of waste in that blood that the liver could not get rid of. So the blood with the waste comes from the liver, and then it goes into the kidneys, and that blood with waste travels down these small little capillaries, and at the end of these capillaries are these things called nephrons. These nephrons are these filters. It's kind of like a traffic cop who stands in the middle of the intersection. It says waste, go that way. Useful materials, go that way. Waste, go that way. Nutrients, useful stuff, go that way. And it directs traffic. You can think of it like that, or you can also think of it like a spaghetti strainer that your mom or dad use in the kitchen. They take the pot full of spaghetti with water and they pour it in the strainer. The strainer has little holes in it so that when you pour the spaghetti in there, the spaghetti in the water, the only thing that comes through is the water. It acts as a filter. It stops one thing and lets another thing go through. That's the same thing that these nephrons do. So these tiny filters, they stop useful nutrients and lets waste through to collect in these ducts. These little collecting ducts are basically, it's the way are little holding areas. Think of it kind of like a bathtub. So the nephrons are like waste that way, useful stuff that way. Waste, useful. Well, when it sends the waste this way, it starts to collect in these little bathtubs, these little collecting ducts. Once these collecting ducts get full, you can picture the water rising in your bathtub. Once it gets full enough, it starts to go over the edge. Okay? If you ever leave your water on your bathtub, it starts to overflow. Same kind of thing. It collects. These collecting ducts holds the waste, but then eventually it sends the waste down the ureters. So it sends the waste down the ureters, which is the brown, the waste. The blood now has been, all the useful stuff that got sent this way with the blood without the waste now, because it just got filtered by the nephrons, goes back to the rest of the body. Okay? And then the waste comes down. So blood with waste comes in, down the capillaries. It got filtered by the nephrons. The nephrons sends blood without waste back to the body. It puts the waste in these collecting ducts and eventually goes down the ureters into the bladder. Now the bladder, it's basically kind of like a plum size when it's empty. When it gets full, it gets as big as kind of a large grapefruit. There was a picture of it in your science book. Once your bladder gets big enough, it temporarily stores it. Once it gets big enough, there's nerves that are all around your bladder. And basically your nervous system then sends signals to your brain saying, my bladder's full, it's time to go. Once it is time to go, the bladder contracts. There's these muscles down here, and they make it so that you don't go to the bathroom. That's what enables you to control yourself and not go in your pants. There's these little muscles down here that kind of hold the urethra shut so that you don't go to the bathroom. Once you do need to go to the bathroom, the sphincters open up, these sphincter muscles open up, the bladder contracts, it goes through the urethra to the outside world. The waste, I don't know if I mentioned that or not, is called urine. When it comes from the liver into the kidneys, it's called urea. Okay, that's another way to put it. But I think that's it. Here, we talked about kidneys, the tiny filters, capillaries. Oh, the blood with waste, when it enters the kidneys, it enters by the renal artery. I probably should have mentioned that. When the blood without waste goes back to the rest of the body, it goes out to the rest of the body by the renal vein. And then we already talked about how the waste goes down the ureters. Okay, we talked about the integumentary system and how it pushes up the waste out the pores. And we have some capillaries down right here. That's what carries the materials to the integumentary system. We talked about the different ways waste leaves the body. And that's pretty much it for the excretory system. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me on Edmodo or Facebook. Other than that, this video test review should help you out pretty good. And I look forward to seeing you guys in class.